48-hour art check. Now you can see all three of us at the same time.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, man. All right. That doesn't look half bad. That's nice. All right. So this will be a little bit different than it has been in the past because in the past, Scott and Josh have been able to see what is on the screen, and now they're flying blind. So I feel like the wedding singer that I have the microphone and you will listen to every word that I have to say. But yeah. So okay. But now we're all on the screen at the same time, so we should be good. We're good to go.
I don't like it because I'm hoping I can just kind of do side glances at people. Like,
Right. Scott's in the best position to do that because he's in the middle, so he can kind of just look either way. But
I'm trying to figure this out. I'm looking at the screen on Josh's thing, so I can kind of see us all three. That's pretty cool.
okay, cool. Okay, so Josh, what have you gotten done in the last 48 hours?
well, so I managed to get the next page of quarterly stories thumbnailed with the lettering and stuff done. So shape to do. I'm trying to get most of the architecture worked out.
Uh huh.
Yeah.
Cool. Your audio keeps cutting in and cutting out. I don't know if that's
Oh, does it?
just a little bit.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I could hear you fine. It wasn't a volume level. It's just kind of cutting in and cutting out. But anyway, let's see how this works. So this is going to be a test run. Last time we had massive technological issues, and so this time I decided instead of going with what's been working for 155 episodes to just try completely new things, which is a terrible idea, but we're going to try it. So Scott,
I think this is how you learn this stuff.
yeah,
Yes.
Scott, what did
I do?
What have you gotten done?
Okay, last 48 hours. So I filmed and edited and uploaded a video on sort of fan art versus original art and just some of the pros and cons of doing fan art and all that stuff. So I uploaded that. I did a little sketch. I'm working on a sketch for the live stream, that little shark guy there, which is part of my son's role-playing game that he's developing. The other thing that you're seeing on screen, the little sugar skull, that's the Dio de los Muertos. It's that's a freelance thing. And I've been working on some different panel layouts and everything for the new Comic Pro kit, and some halftones for that as well. So that's what I've been working on.
Cool. That looks good. I like that. I like that stuff. And
awesome.
For me, I have been doing more rigging, and so I don't really have a lot to show right now. But I have been taking one of my old Wasp camera head character, and I've been rigging it, and I can now, this sounds weird, but this is what I can do. I can now control how much the butt compresses and curls and rotates, as well as the focusing of the camera. So it goes in and out and rotates. And so that doesn't sound that impressive, but it was, there's like 9 controls that I've linked to these 2 joysticks. So it's kind of fun. Yeah, so that's pretty much that. How about challenges, Josh?
So challenges are mainly just life stuff. So it's just balance and kind of typical balance type stuff. Legit. Mainly just family and my work, all kind of conflicting with. But the cool thing is, I'm still kind of overcoming them and getting things done and seeing some progress on my book. So I'm pretty excited because I think that'll translate to a finished book pretty soon, which is kind of exciting. So yeah.
Cool.
Oh, your audio cut out.
Oh, it did? At what point?
Just at the very end.
Okay. I was just saying it's exciting because even though there's a lot of challenges, I'm managing to get closer to kind of finish on my book, and it's been a long haul, so it's kind of neat to overcome it. Am I still cutting?
Just at the very end, but I think we were able to piece everything together.
It must.
That
It
is
must
so
not.
weird.
It must not
You
be
lose my
cutting out.
connection?
It must not be cutting out consistently because I heard everything that he just said, but not what he had said before. So
All right.
so I don't know. Well, we're trying a new system here. So let us know in the chat. We've got a few people watching. Let us know in the chat if it's coming through. I think it should be.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we'll have to see.
yeah. Scott, how about you? What kind of challenges have you had?
Challenge. Oh, I'll get my challenges. Hold on a second. She's sleeping, but these are my challenge. This is my challenge right here. I got this
Nice.
puppy, and she needs to be like potty trained and stuff, and needs to go out every like 30 minutes or so. So I keep having to watch her and everything, but she's been taking up a lot of my time. So
Aw.
you can go back to sleep now.
That's a good challenge to have, a new puppy.
I thought you were reaching for like a list of challenges, and then you pulled out a dog. Oh, that's funny.
So is this going to be the new thing? Like every Monday, it's a different puppy. What are your other challenges? Well, I've got this other puppy. It's like there's just dogs collecting.
No. I'm sure the one puppy is going to be plenty of challenges.
Oh yeah,
Josh or Scott is Scott's waiting for the spots to come in so he can make some coats. It's a bad joke right there. I don't know. Yeah, random stuff. Some guests at the house. Different things. My wife has finished her play on Saturday, and so I'm no longer single parent in the evenings, and yeah, just nothing huge. I had I've some home repair stuff that always takes forever, and I had to install this baby gate thing that didn't want to install right. Anyway, my son's still not crawling, but he's rolling enough to where we can't we had to put some baby gates up. So yeah, so stuff like that, but nothing serious. How about plans, Josh?
All right, so hopefully I don't cut off a bunch. My plans are to get the next page basically lettered and well, not lettered, just drawn with rough pencils, and then hopefully tonight I'm hoping to just get the whole building kind of fleshed out, because it's going to be like a perspective shot of the interior of a church building, which is going to be a lot of pews and stuff. So that should be, hopefully my work will be cut out for me just for that. And then generally with that, what I'll do is rough it out first, rough out the environment, and then kind of roughly place the characters as almost like stick figures first in perspective, just to get the perspective right. And then I'll kind of flesh them out from there. So realistically, maybe not that finished panel, but I'd like to be close to finished on it, at least with the rough pencils. So yeah. How much cut out of that, what I just said?
I heard it all. Yeah,
awesome.
So all of that came through. How about you, Scott? What are your plans?
So let's see. So I'm going to continue working on the Comic Maker Pro Kit, and I'm probably going to continue working on this character sketch, which will be my next sort of live stream. If you've seen the last two live streams, I'm kind of doing this weird hybrid kind of pre-recorded slash live stream thing. So I'll probably do that, maybe Thursday. I don't know. I think 4th might be a good day to do that. People will be home from work. So I'll do that. And yeah, I mean, that'll take up the bulk of my time, and then probably freelance stuff too.
Cool. Yeah, I've got, I'm going to continue rigging this wasp to kind of get that done. I do have this video that I plan on doing at some point where I talk about joysticks and sliders and rigging up the robot character that Scott designed. And I've got a little bit of client work to finish up that I should be able to knock out not too long. And that should... Yeah. Oh, and I forgot to mention this as far as progress. I think I'm fleshing out better mechanics for the animated short that I'm kind of trying to make work. And I've got to play with some stuff to see if it'll function the way that I want it to. But I'm close to having that work. I've gone through about 5 iterations in my mind of like how to visually symbolize some of the things that I want to do. So I'm still kind of cranking on that. That's been a lot of like shower thinking and not a ton of kind of pencil to paper at this point. But anyway, I'll have to run it by you guys off air because I think it'll make sense, but I'm not exactly sure yet. So anyway, all right. So that's that. That's the Artcheck. What do you guys want to do? What do you guys want to do as far as a topic?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what we said we were. We said we had enough to do a whole other show on something we touched on last week when we were talking about sunk cost. I don't know who's in the chat. I see Squatchy. I don't know if he remembers what we were talking about. I don't know.
I mean, we kind of went from sunk cost and wandered into how to tell the difference between resistance and kind of that instinct that something isn't working that you should abandon. And we kind of dove into that. I don't know if that is sparking anything. That's kind of how we...
Yeah.
Projects that you should do, projects that you should fight through and finish, projects that you should abandon for something better. There is a lot of that kind of talk.
Yeah.
Any of that you guys want to mine, or do you want to... Well, we could tackle like kind of something that's being proven right now while we're working, which is the idea of like kind of tackling something new before you know everything about it. Because
shifting technologies and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because I kind of think there's a lot to be said for that. I think there's a lot of people who kind of wait for knowledge to be kind of like fully accumulated before jumping into something, and a lot of the time that actually prevents innovation. So like that might be something worth mining.
I love that.
It's like one of the things I always tell people that want to do. Oh, okay, go ahead. I forgot you got to set it up.
So today's topic is getting your hands dirty and jumping in, getting started before you know what you're doing. And Josh, you want to kind of kick it off for us?
Sure. So at the top of this, we're trying out like Discord, which we've never used. None of us have ever used, and we're mainly trying it because Cory found out from Gaz, a friend of ours on Facebook, big part of the 100 Days community. We've had him on here. We've had him on Artcasters a lot, and anyhow, he gave us a tip to kind of use Discord to stream 3 people at the same time, which is why while recording this, we're probably all going to sound a little weird because we're all trying to kind of hold positions to stay in the screen and stuff. Right. But the point being, we didn't kind of wait till we had it perfected. We actually went with it. And when Cory said like, hey, I want to try this thing, like none of us were like, oh, we can't, we don't know it yet. Like we were just like, okay, well, let's figure it out. And I think there's actually, it's funny, but when that was happening, I was realizing, well, I think that's partially why, like when you follow what Cory kind of does, like all the time, you'll see him advance and learn new things, like new software, new like tricks, like how to rig like things on After Effects, like all these new kind of things that he doesn't necessarily know at first, and then within months it becomes pretty affluent with it. And I think you'll see that across the board with Scott and myself as well, because I do think like I think in a weird way, to kind of be able to get into this industry, you kind of need a little bit of, you actually kind of need to go a little bit before you're ready.
Yeah.
Like,
And TJ,
on software, on techniques, and so on. Does that kind of start
yeah,
us off okay?
and TJ
Yeah,
says
and sometimes it's
that sums up nearly my entire career for the last 20 years. Jump in before you're prepared. So I think it's pretty common. Scott, go ahead.
I was just going to say sometimes you don't really have a choice because it looks like that Hangouts, was what we've been using, is going away, and rather quickly. I think it said August, which I don't know if they're rolling something out or if they already have another option or what. But so I'm assuming that Hangouts isn't even a part of this right now. This setup we have right now, right?
Yeah, no, this is circumventing
Okay.
Hangouts completely.
Okay. Yeah. So this is definitely something that also Josh and I are going to have to figure out for, the Artcasters, but sometimes technology shifts, and you've got to if you're not prepared for it, you've got to like, oh, I got to do something different now, and that could happen with like platforms, or like if you're a MySpace person back in the day, the or even more sort of recent, but like I don't know, what were the live stream? There was Meerkat, and there was what was the other one?
Periscope.
I think it started with a P. Periscope. Are they still around? Any of those?
Periscope is still around. Meerkat was killed by Periscope. Then Periscope was purchased
Okay.
by Twitter, and
Okay.
still technically exists. Though I haven't been on there in a long
Yeah.
time. Because right after
So
that,
yeah, I mean,
Facebook and Instagram and everybody else started adding live features and just had a bigger, more integrated audience.
yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, I know Discord's got a whole thing with the gaming and everything, and it's like a big thing. So I think we're pretty safe as far as using this, at least in the near future. But you never know. I mean, sometimes it's cool to kind of be an early adopter and jump out on things early and kind of learn that stuff. But you never know if it's going to last. So there's also that's one of the drawbacks to kind of starting something new, I guess.
Yeah. What I would say, like, comes to mind for me is like, I've talked about this before, but like I used to always describe this guy as the guy who's writing the next Lord of the Rings. Like there's a certain kind of personality of writer that I met a lot of the time, especially when I was going to junior college. So like when I went to junior college, the time I went, it was before like Community was a TV show and stuff. Um, but that first season of Community was pretty accurate because you had like these people who had been at junior college for like 10 years who would just be like, yeah, I'm going to transfer next year. And you're like, when did, like, every year you say that and yet you never leave? And there were a lot of people who just kind of got stuck at community college. And a lot of those people that I knew were like aspiring science fiction writers who like they'd go to community college, they'd go to like these creative writing classes for taking them for like the 10th time. And they would have like a backpack full of like notes and diaries and like different dictionaries they had created and stuff. And like it was like just Bible's worth of information, like these giant encyclopedias they had created of this world for a story. And I would ask them like, well, so have you written your story? And they're like, well, no, like I need to flesh out like the entire thing first. And
Yeah.
I have a suspicion most of those guys are still there, like with just adding another like addition to that encyclopedia without ever publishing or creating anything from it. It's just like creating this giant fantasy environment. And anytime I've kind of stumbled upon that kind of mentality with creator, I usually am pretty big on like just like don't like you can't wait until you have everything worked out. Like we've which kind of goes against some of what we've talked about before, where like Cory and I were talking about like really liking structure to stories, and like Scott, like I'm sure you could chime into like the story structure you're putting into Young and the Dead. We're all big fans of like structure and like like a layout and a plan. But there's a difference between kind of planning and then just kind of going for it. It's kind of akin to like the best advice I got before being a parent, where where like I was really hesitant at first to have a kid because I was just like, well, I don't have the funds, and I'm like freelance, because at the time I was freelance, and I'm like, I don't know how my wife and I'll do it. We want a kid, but we don't have like the income, or like, and even if we get the income, like, how are we going to get the security? And like, we don't have a house and we're in an apartment. How's it going to work? And I remember a relative just being like, look, you're never, like, if you're waiting for the perfect conditions to have a kid, you're never going to have a kid.
Yeah.
Because the perfect conditions kind of just, it just kind of, you just kind of roll with it and you make it work. And weirdly enough, like, that's exactly how it worked for us. In fact, like, having a kid kind of motivated me to get a house and to get like a career and stuff like that. So it's, I guess my point is like, I think there are some personalities that want to learn everything there is to know about something before kind of jumping into a pool, and in art that can be really detrimental because you have limited time.
Yeah.
And so, like, I love wormholes more than anyone, but like, fighting that limited time is like really important. And you know, you can prepare for a fight for like years, but at some point you got to get in the ring, or you're going to kind of like age out of it, you know? I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah. Well, and here's
yeah,
here's something, and I won't name this person because I do like most of what they say, but there is some really bad advice that I took to heart at first, and it was like, don't start your comic until you have like a really good working feel for like the following things. And there was like a big list, you know, like, and so I worked on that stuff for a bit. And anyway, like Squatchy in the chats, he said, yeah, that's how I approach comics, is just like jumping in, right? And so there's some real value to that, that concept of like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out as I go, because failing and iterating and figuring stuff out is way better when you're solving actual problems than when you're solving intellectual guesses, you know? And so here's what I've seen a lot of is, I'll give an example. I teach the capstone, the 400 level final class for visual communication. And I have seen for semester after semester after semester, we put them in these big groups and give them a giant project. They choose their own, and they spend almost consistently. It's super vague, totally wide open. They can do anything they want, and that is terrifying to creative, like to have no limits and no direction. And so they spend usually about 6 to 8 weeks of a 14-week semester preparing and studying and researching and planning, and you know, and no matter what I say, it's not until that looming deadline feels like it's breathing down their neck that they actually start doing. And so I've just noticed this thing with people who are unfamiliar with something, that if they haven't got into the habit of like kind of what we do and what a lot of people in the chat are saying that they do is, well, I'm gonna jump in and give it my best and try to keep my eyes open so that I can recognize like when I'm screwing things up, you know? And like, this is a perfect example. I opened I opened this technology, this Discord thing. I tested it out with a couple of people at work for like 10 minutes. You know, I did as much research as I felt like I could, talked to a few people about it. But ultimately, I have learned in the last 15 minutes about 6 things that I'm going to do differently next time, that I don't think would have happened, you know, had I not been live on the air, like streaming through OBS and doing all this stuff. And it's kind of like, if you're having trouble relating this to like a creative endeavor because you think like you need to study anatomy before you draw a comic or whatever, you should be studying anatomy for sure. But you should also just be drawing a comic. I want you to think of like doing unrelated skills that are not creative. Say playing in a video game. try to get really good at a specific video game by only reading about that game, or only watching other people play that game, or only talking to other people play that game, or try to learn to ride a bike if you've never ridden a bike before, through like intellectual
Yeah.
pursuits or planning. At some point in time, you just got to hop on the bike and fall off and skin your knees and go, okay, so I don't want to do that again. What caused that? Your body will get a feel for like what's going on, and you kind of course correct on instinct in a lot of situations. Like, you know, people are saying, like I don't know exactly, how to do this page or whatever, but I know that didn't work, and I know that worked, and you can kind of like start to hone in on the stuff that's working, the stuff that's not working, and the study I think needs to happen concurrently to the execution, because there's kind of this like preparation paralysis that I think can happen. And
Yeah.
I did this with my first comic a couple of years ago, where I had, I don't know, a dozen pages in the can before I went live on a webcomic, because I was waiting for the right time. I was waiting to be ready. I was waiting for this. It wasn't good enough yet. It wasn't this. It wasn't that. It wasn't whatever. I wasn't where I wanted to be. But it's years later. I'm still not where I want to be, but I'm way better than I was. And now I realize
Yeah.
that part of my personality is to be dissatisfied with my work, and that's one of the things that drives me to improve. And so if I'm waiting for completion or satisfaction, or whatever, a certain level of quality, I will never put anything out into the world. I'll just constantly be in this kind of preparation paralysis. And so doing things and showing them publicly should happen concurrently to planning and learning and researching, not in some sort of sequence. Otherwise, you never finish anything. There's people out there that have never finished anything, and there's people out there that have never started anything, because they've got their own version of the Cimmerillion that makes no sense to anybody but them, because they've written their own language or whatever, but they haven't written like the first line in the chapter one.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like too, I don't think we're suggesting that that people don't plan or even back plan, because we've talked ad nauseum about that.
Right.
It's super important to have like a framework and to kind of study structure and framing and stuff like that. But I guess the drive of what we're saying is like the better way to kind of learn, at least for personalities like myself. And when I used to teach, that was a huge thing that I decided to do with my students, was like trying to kind of make the learning all very project oriented,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to gear projects to be flexible enough to cater to the interests of the students. Because the thing is, you're not going to retain a lot of information if you're like just learning something to get a grade, and you're definitely not going to retain a lot of information if you're just kind of like cramming like the night before and just trying to like memorize and just do rote learning. But like the kind of lessons you're going to remember are like, if you want to make an awesome like event poster for a band in a genre you like, and like you have to figure out, okay, well, so how do I place type? And that gets you more interested in typography than just randomly reading about the grid. Like the grid makes a lot more sense when you've got a challenge where you have to figure out how to place the type. And then when you need to figure out how to place the type, then you'll know to search for like things that'll lead to the grid, right?
Yeah.
So it's to me, that's the best way to learn. It's honestly, like Cory talked a lot about After Effects, and I did not want to open up After Effects until I had a project that I wanted to do on After Effects. The second I had a project to do, suddenly I'm talking to Cory all the time, like, Cory, what do I do here? Because this is weird. This thing like glitched out, and I'm not sure why it's doing this. And like that's where it gets a lot more interesting. And like once again, you learn a lot more from just getting your hands dirty and like and doing it. I don't know, Scott, you got anything to add to that?
No, I mean, one thing I always tell people who are like, oh, I don't know what to do as far as comics or whatever. The best way to learn how to make comics is by making comics, and
Yeah.
just start with something. And if there's something that you think is, that you want to be your big epic or whatever, just put that aside and just start something simple. And you never know, because Young and the Dead was just, originally it was just I just was trying to think of a simple idea. And I thought, okay, kids versus zombies. And it was, it's like, that's simple enough. There doesn't really have to be much to it. It's a pretty basic concept, and it was just going to be like a little 8-pager and everything. And I started writing, and I'm like, oh wait, this would be cool to have a character like this, and then I started creating all these characters, and it became more about the characters than just the concept and everything. So you never know. I mean, it starts to take shape, and if I worried too much, if I went into that story thinking that it was going to be this big thing, I don't know. I don't know. I probably would have done what I always had done previous to that, which was rework things and constantly do all that stuff. And it was just because I was like, I had these two ideas. One was, kids versus zombie. The other was sort of like a Robinson Crusoe story where a guy was stranded on an island, and then, like this, I don't know, cruise ship or something, some ship runs aground and it's filled with zombies. So he's trapped on this island with zombies. And I decided to go with the kids versus zombies version, but either one of those, but they're very simple concepts, and you could just do a simple story with it. And that's why I picked those two ideas, because it didn't seem like there was much to it, but if you have a kernel of an idea, it can grow into, something else. So you never know. I mean, but I wouldn't, don't think too much about it. Just start with something simple, and it can remain simple and you can get it done, or it may start to take form and become something else. But the only reason that, that kind of started to get going, because I wasn't trying to do this big giant magnum opus, this epic or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, about like not being precious about it, and just kind of picking something you can be flexible with, because sometimes that freedom where you're not so precious, you're not like, oh, I'm making my magnum opus. You might find yourself like being a little looser with the process, and as a result, you might end up with something better. The TJ Dupree in the chats mentioned the best creative assignments at work come when asked, "Can you XXX?" ? And you answer yes, no matter what.
Yeah.
Anything can be learned. Thank you, internet. And I agree with that. Like, having been someone who, when I was a junior designer and I had my first in-house gig, they were like, do you know Adobe Illustrator? And I was like, yeah. And I didn't. I had like one class at the time. They didn't have classes that specialized in the program. So it just like was like, here's the pen tool and redraw the Batman symbol. And that was it. That's all I had. So I went in being like, yeah, I'm an expert at Adobe Illustrator. And within a week, I became an expert at Adobe Illustrator. I just absorbed and asked a ton of questions and like BS'd my way through it, and like, and really quickly learned, because you're learning on the job. And then you retain that information, because all it takes to learn how to just hit Command S like an insane lunatic, even if you're working on InDesign and it auto saves, you're still hitting Command S. All it takes is just one computer crash where your computer like screws up and you lose an hour and a half of work and you're on the clock. And then you're like, oh, okay, I need to hit that shortcut all the time.
Yeah.
And every shortcut acquired, like the ones that you retain, are all ones that I think where there's stakes to it. If there's no stakes, there's not a lot of incentive to learn,
Yeah, it's almost like storytelling too.
Yeah.
Like, if there's no stakes, no one cares about the character. It's an interesting thing, because every time I've done anything where it's just like, oh, I'm just going to try to figure this out, for some reason I never learn that much. I kind of scratch the surface of it. I think our brains are geared towards doing the bare minimum, because our brains have to like process so much stuff that they give you like the feeling of like, yeah, you completely understand this. You don't need to do anymore. It's cool. Like, you've used it. It's great, right? But then if you actually are trying to accomplish something, like I'm trying to do this animated short, or I'm trying to do this comic, or I'm trying to do whatever, like oh, well, this panel like requires me to know anatomy and foreshortening. And so I can't just have the feeling in my brain that I know that because I watched a tutorial video. I actually have to like see if I can do it. And so there's kind of that level of like, there's like desire, and then above desire there's understanding, and then above understanding there's knowing, and then above knowing there's doing, and above doing is like there's being able to explain to other people how to do it. And so there's
Yeah.
kind of these different cognitive levels of of skill. And if you're stuck at the understanding, that's a useless and really dangerous place to be because
Yeah.
it's just a fleeting feeling, but you can't actually do it. And so that's
Yeah.
why I think like I think there's kind of two sides to this coin. On the one side, you know, I'm comfortable at work saying I don't know, but I'm fairly confident that I can figure it out rather than kind of like faking it. But it kind of depends on the situation. Like a lot of workplaces are different. But that's kind of how I've done it. But on the flip
Yeah.
side, waiting until I completely, feel like a master at something before I do anything, I feel like that's giving into kind of imposter syndrome, where it's like you're setting
Yep.
you're setting up credentials that don't exist. I have to pass this bar. I've got to be able to get the certificate. When there's no bar and there's no certificate and there's no test, there's just something that needs to
Yeah.
get done. And if you're willing to do that thing, nobody cares. If you get it done proficiently and effectively, they don't care that you were learning as you went. They just care that it got done. And so getting to the point where you're like, yeah, I could do that. And there's a lot of things like, especially lately, Scott comes to me with this problem in animation is like, hey, I'd like to hire you to do this thing, and for a client, and I didn't know how to do about 80% of what was required, but I was really confident that I'd be able to figure it out. And I said, I don't know how to do that, but I'm pretty sure I can figure it out. Let's do it, because that's just how it works. And so without that,
Yeah. And
I wouldn't know everything that I've learned in the past 3 weeks, which is a huge leveling up for me in my animation.
Yeah,
yeah.
I was going to bring that up, but you brought it up for me. But yeah, this project that we're working on, you didn't. I mean, you didn't really. This is all basically all new stuff. It's in After Effects, which you have a good familiarity with, but the other tools that you're using, I mean, you didn't even have those tools. You had to purchase those
Yeah.
to do this thing and learn it as you go. And there's probably a little. You probably didn't get paid as much as you probably should have because you were kind of learning. But now that you know that moving forward, I think it's going to be super beneficial. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as long
Yeah.
as
And
you have
that's,
as you have a partner who's willing to receive 2 or 3 messages a day like, I broke it again, I'm not sure what's going on, but I'll figure it out, I think I can get it tonight. Sorry, go ahead, Josh.
I was never worried. So anytime you said you broke it, I'm like, you'll figure it out.
Cory, too, I think of like teaching because the first semester that I walked into a classroom, like the weird thing is when you get hired as an adjunct, at least the first time I did, there wasn't like a briefing or a lot of explanation or mentorship. You're just kind of given a classroom, and then they're like, well, we need a syllabus. And you're like, oh, okay, now I got to ask around how to do a syllabus because I've never done a syllabus. And then like
Right.
you end up in the same scenario. Like no first teacher, when they first walk into a classroom, has that figured out 100%. And that's what like. I remember feeling like total imposter syndrome when I walked in that room because I was like, okay, now I'm going to teach a bunch of college age kids, and who the hell am I to teach like a college class? Like this is weird. And then I realized like within a week of doing that, like first off, they'll ask you questions that you can answer, and you're like, oh, I guess I have accrued a lot of knowledge. You just kind of don't realize it until you talk to people who don't have that knowledge, and then you're like, oh, okay, like that's something I can do. And similarly, like, about a week in, you also realize like no teachers when they step into a classroom for the first time, know what they're doing.
Right.
Like this is just part of the whole thing. Like the only way you learn how is just by doing it. And then by doing it, you like learn, and then you get better and you refine. Like a semester later, you get student reviews or evals and you're like, okay, well, maybe I need to work on this. And like for me, my big problem coming in was my crits were like way too harsh. Because I was just coming out of like a scenario where like Chris, who's in the chats, like is a friend of mine. We used to freelance together and we crit each other's work and we'd just be brutally honest. Like, dude, that thumb is off, just fix it. And you'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks, man.
Right.
Because you need that advice. You want to please your client. You want to cut down on revision time. So you make the best possible piece in the shortest possible amount of time. And like, but like going into college, like I wouldn't have known how to critique a college kid's work until I was in that scenario. And then you learn. Like, that's just, I don't know if it was any different for you, Cory. Like when you walked in, were you just like, I was made for this? Or were you like, I don't really know what I'm doing?
A little of both, because one thing I'm confident in, and anybody who's been part of this community for more than 5 minutes will know this, is that I can fill space with talking. And so that's one thing that I'm pretty confident in, is that I can think while speaking. But at the same time, all of the scenarios where I had been doing that, whether that be in the boardroom or in a pitch meeting or with a client, or were kind of unrelated to stand and deliver like lecture situation. And so I learned really quick that while many of those skills are applicable, they are not the same thing. And so it was kind of like a baptism of fire. Yeah. And what I did is, my dad's a teacher, my mom's a teacher, all four of my grandparents are teachers, half my aunts and uncles are teachers. And so I grew up knowing a lot of teachers, because that was like most of my parents' like friend circles. And I remember a couple of my friends who are 20 years older than me. One of them, he's a super smart guy. He said, what you need to understand is that that teaching is, as long as you're a week ahead of the students, you're fine. And I was like, oh, okay. And so my first semester, I spent about as much time as I did at work, like prepping for the next day. And I was about 2 to 4 days ahead of everybody the entire semester. And then at the end of the semester, the students didn't know any different. They didn't know that I was literally like scrambling to get this done. And I feel like that's really, really applicable. And Chris in the chat has a good comment where it's like improv, where you say yes and you can kind of like in all of this, there's this idea of just forward momentum. Like the worst improv partner is somebody who like disagrees or derails or stops forward momentum.
Yeah.
And then TJ's saying, I learn best when I teach someone else. And I think that's a really good comment as well. It's not just being able to do it. And that's why I say like a higher level is being able to explain it. It's actually, to me, the opposite of those who can't teach, or those who can't teach. Because like Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, then you don't understand it well enough yet. And so I do think that both of those things are situational and true in certain circumstances. But one of the things that I would recommend to anyone trying to figure something out, and this is something that's really helped me, is when you learn something, even if it's a little something, go teach it to someone, because that will solidify your understanding and your ability of that thing. Because if you move it from kind of vague instinct into some sort of articulation, whether you write it down or you do a video or you pull somebody aside. And I used to do this kind of instinctively, and now I've built it into my process, but I used to just pull people aside, sometimes randomly at work. And I'd be like, I just learned this thing. Let me show you. And most of the time they were really excited because it was like an art department. They're like, oh, sweet. And they would do that with me. And you kind of get to share that experience of sitting in a bullpen and having like, hey, did you know that Illustrator did this? Did you know that, Magento did this or whatever? But then I've started building it in my process. And that's why a ton of my YouTube channel is made up of tutorials, is because it's not like I knew 100% of everything that I needed to know to make those tutorials. It's like I learned a little bit and it made sense as kind of a video. And so I was like, I'm going to put this encapsulation of knowledge that I just did in a video. That's helpful for two reasons. One, I articulate it, which brings it to a different part of your brain, helps move it into long-term memory. And two, if I don't use that every day, but I need it a year from now, I can be like, I know at one point in time I knew how to do this. I've completely forgotten. I go back and it's like I can listen to myself teach myself. It's super helpful,
Yeah.
but being able to explain it is a really important part of that process. And that's another thing where people feel like, well, I'm not an expert. I'm not recognized in the field. You know, who am I to teach people how to draw or teach people how to animate or whatever? And it's like, if you know one day's work more than someone else, you're going to be beneficial to that person. And so that's the only thing that you need to
Yeah.
know is a little bit because someone knows less than you. So teach it.
Yeah, and like one of the best pieces of advice I got too, and this actually that ties into 2 points. One is as you're doing this, as you're like, you can call it whatever you know. It could. Some people say fake it till you make it kind of thing. You know, some people just say like be fearless and kind of jump in with like knowing that you're going to be able to learn it. But whatever way you go about it, if you go about it with an open mind and a lot of questions, you're going to come out stronger. And that like the best piece of advice I got before teaching people was like basically do not whatever you do because my mom's was a teacher for like 40 years and she gave me this advice and then buddy of mine Rick who taught college gave me this advice same advice like where whatever you do don't pretend you know something you don't
Right.
because the class will read through it and you'll lose their respect for like an entire semester and that's entirely true. One of the best things about that was like when I was in class the first time I was confronted with something like when you're in front of a room full of people and somebody kind of asks you something that exposes a lack of knowledge, the gut instinct of a human being is just to get defensive and be like, oh no I know it or just pretend. But instead I just fought that and was like, yeah, I don't know, do you know, like, and honestly they had a better solution
Yeah.
than I would have had on a program, and then I learned a new thing. And I remember from that moment on like really enjoying that. I enjoy that at my work too when like one of my employees stumbles upon a better solution than I have, like I'm happy because that's going to save me time and that'll save our team time. So it's like at the end of the day, like that's one of the coolest things is like if you kind of approach it with an open mind, tying into that improv thing too, just like more of a collaborative approach where you're just kind of engaging and adding to things as opposed to you don't have to lead the whole show.
Yeah.
That can lead to like some really cool growth. And also as you're engaging in things you have no idea what you're getting into, it is helpful to have people to ask. So like like for instance when I delved into After Effects, I played around and I got my hands dirty, and then I got into this point where the whole file wasn't functioning. I searched all over the place, right? And then finally I just texted Cory and he was like, oh, did you press like these two things? And I'm like, oh, that was it. That's all I needed to know. But like the point is like those questions are going to guide you and get you to the right place. But it's also a reiteration that it's better to not do these things in a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
Because I think if you're doing it in a vacuum, if you're just kind of doing it alone, you can run the risk of like the Silmarillion problem we talked about earlier,
Right.
where you could just go down rabbit holes and feel like you're acquiring knowledge and come out with nothing. And that's to me that's one of my biggest fears. Like one of the things I'm happy about with this book too is I've been working on a comic for like close to 5 years now, and it's going to be done. And I'm excited about that because one of my worst fears is being the guy who just works on the thing forever that never gets done. Like I don't want to be that guy, Yeah. Anyhow.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And along those lines, like admitting that you don't know something does two things, especially in the classroom, but also elsewhere. One is I would hope that if, like, let's say I'm doing like a live demonstration, whether that be on YouTube or whether that be on in the classroom or whatever, and somebody says, "Hey, how do you do this?" That happens to me all the time. Um, and a lot of the times I know because I've like troubleshot and problem solved and whatever for lots of different people. And the only reason I knew that question with you, Josh, is because I had screwed that up a number of times, and so I had to figure out how to fix it. And so that's super helpful. But when I say, "Oh, I don't know," does anybody know? That does two things. One is right then people realize, oh, he's willing to publicly admit that he doesn't know something. And so automatically that means that everything else that he's said, he does know that. And it adds credibility to the things that you do cop to. The other thing that it does is there's a stage of neurological development in college years. And so between like 18 to 24, where you are switching from a style of learning where it is that there is an authority figure and they have the answers and you sit at the feet of the authority figure and receive information. You're transitioning from that to distancing yourself from authority and being able to figure out information, what is good information and what is bad information, and how to source information yourself. And that's a super important transition because if you recognize that, like, oh, the teacher didn't know, but like we as a class figured this out, or like I searched the internet and I didn't know, but like my buddy and I were able to like solve this problem, you realize something super important, and that's it. If the authorities don't have the answer, that's not the end of the road. That means that actually you are going to become an authority on that particular niche problem because you're going to solve this problem. And so if you gain the ability to do something that there isn't an answer to, all of a sudden that's really valuable, right? If there's not a current solution to something, and then you realize in your brain that if somebody else can solve it, then so can you, and you come up with the solution, all of a sudden you know something, you can do something, you can whatever. And so all of these examples in the chat that people are giving of like, being the guy at work that's willing to say, well, heck, I don't know, but like I'm willing to get messy. Let's figure it out. Let's brawl a little bit with this problem and kind of work it out. Well, all of a sudden at the end of that, if you're the dude who comes in and you're like, I didn't know this thing 2 weeks ago, but now I know this thing. Let me show you. You become super valuable to that organization for a number of reasons. Not just because you know that one piece of information or that one skill, but because they know that the unsolvable problems can be solved, and that information isn't going to be hoarded. It's going to be taught. And so you become a very valuable member of that company because it's like, hey, I know if we give it to TJ, I know if we give it to Chris, I know if we give it to Victor, they're going to figure it out and they're going to teach everybody else, which is great. That's what I want. I want the whole organization to be better because I gave this project to Bob or whoever.
Yeah, that's good.
So,
okay, well, cool. Before we wrap it, I just think we should take advantage of the fact that we have this this kind of amazing framing going on, and so I'm kind of thinking we should just tilt our heads slowly towards Scott.
Okay, which way am I tilting my head?
You're in the middle, Scott. So you just
So I just look at the camera.
I don't know what's going on right now. You just look at the camera. I'm just going to gesture in this direction, I think.
I'll put my arms around you guys.
Oh wait, here we go, Scott. I'm gonna put my hand into your frame. You put your hand so it continues my arm.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, a little lower. There you go. There we go. Oh, this is so stupid. I love it. This is great.
Okay. Well, sweet. So, so if you guys are kind of hesitating to learn new things out there, like get out there and like learn it and just dive in, you'll figure it out. I think thanks to everybody who joined us in the chats, and thanks to like Cory for like this badass new format. I think this is pretty cool to have all three of us live. That makes it a little more entertaining.
Yeah, and I'm interested
how to implement it.
Yeah, I'm interested. Those of you in the chats, what did you think of this versus the other one where it's just a split screen? I also changed in the middle where the chat is up on the screen, which might be a little dangerous. But I trust you guys. I trust you not to do something weird. Anyway, so yeah, all of that is kind of interesting. But I'm curious on if you're watching this live, let us know in the chat. If you're watching this later, let us know in the comments what you think. Were there problems? I know there's some audio issues at the beginning, but feedback would be helpful.
I could just say from my end, Cory,
Yeah.
that there are some like audio drops, and it's usually not long. It just like cuts out like real quick. And also, I know it from my perspective. I don't know if everyone else is hearing this, and I don't know what my audio levels sound like. But Josh is quite a bit louder than you are, so yeah, the audio levels seem to be off a little. So I don't know when I'm talking if I'm dropping too. But in the beginning, Josh was dropping out just here and there, and then you've been doing that too, Cory. So
Okay.
Yeah, we'll work it out. I think we'll figure it out at some point. So
Okay.
we will refine it and learn from our things and kind of make this even better. But so far everybody in the chat seems to be digging it, so that's good. All right, should we call it?
Yeah. So if you want to check out Joshua Kemble's stuff, then you can go to joshuakemble.com. If you want to check out Scott Serkland stuff, you can go to circworks.com. And if you'd like to check out my stuff, you can go to corykerr.com. And even though we haven't updated in a little while, the podcast is available at corykerr.com/48hr. And so check all that stuff out. This is a super active chat, and it was really awesome. So we're going to experiment with this, see if there's ways that we can get the audio to work a little bit better. But yeah, for the most part, I like kind of how that went down. So go make stuff, whether you know how to do it or not, and you'll figure it out as you go. And we will see you guys in a couple days.